Pot, weed, grass, the devil's lettuce, whatever you want to call it, Americans and lots of Americans are using marijuana. The House of Representatives voted twice in the last 2 years to pass the Marijuana Opportunity Reinvestment and Expungement Act, or the MORE Act. But the Senate has failed to bring the bill up for debate. Now that's despite Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer saying marijuana reform is one of his top priorities. While this latest marijuana reform measure stagnates at the federal level, individual states continue to move forward with plans of their own. Now, even if you're sober, this can be a little hazy, so I'll do my best to break it down for you. Anyone is free to use marijuana however they'd like in 18 states, including California, New York, and Illinois. Another 19 states have either legalized medical marijuana, allowed for some decriminalization of recreational use, or both. Nebraska and North Carolina both decriminalized marijuana, but do not have medical marijuana programs. 7 states let some patients use low doses of marijuana, but only in certain forms. And finally, marijuana, in all of its forms, is completely illegal in 4 states. Confused? Well, you're not alone.
You do have this sort of patchwork, and as states have implemented cannabis reforms, you've seen what has worked well, what hasn't worked as well, because it's not necessarily the easiest thing to do, and you want to make sure that you're responsible with it, and different states have different priorities.
South Carolina Representative Nancy Mace, a GOP member in a state where marijuana remains, as of now, completely illegal, is the author of the state's Reform Act.
When I tell people what the bill does, even the die-hard conservatives support it. When they realize, oh my gosh, you're just protecting the rights of states and my state can decide what it wants to do, oh my gosh, heck yes.
It's been called the most comprehensive framework for the decriminalization of cannabis at the federal level, introduced by congressional Republicans. But to date, the state's Reform Act hasn't received the same sort of coverage or media traction that the MORE Act has received.
I was actually a speaker at that bill introduction last year on the Hill. And I think the reason that it didn't get as much momentum, or a lot of people haven't heard a lot about it, is because it was introduced in the fall. And then we all know Congress is super busy towards the end of the year trying to do all the other things.
Jill Snyder was a cop in New York before joining the nonpartisan think tank R Street. She says with the MORE Act stalled again and the 2022 midterms fast approaching, the table could be set for the state's Reform Act to take the spotlight. Now, like the MORE Act, Mace's bill decriminalizes marijuana at the federal level. It allows for interstate commerce and expunges convictions for nonviolent marijuana-related offenses. The state's Reform Act, like the MORE Act, also creates an excise tax on marijuana sales. But there are some key differences here. The Democratic-backed MORE Act creates a 5% excise tax, which grows to 8% after 3 years. Chuck Schumer's version of a marijuana reform bill in the Senate, which has not yet been introduced, is said to start with a 10% excise tax that balloons to 25% within 5 years. The state's Reform Act caps excise taxes at 3%.
When things are illegal or things are legal but just so ridiculously taxed, it's still allowing room for black market flourishment. If you're making it that difficult to legally cultivate and sell marijuana because the taxes are 8%, you're still going to have that illegal element. There's going to be criminality because people don't want to pay that.
Under Congresswoman Mace's bill, the tax revenue generated through excise taxes would be split among the Department of Justice, the Small Business Administration, the Department of Veterans Affairs, and Health and Human Services. The disbursements are similar to those of the MORE Act, but obviously the actual amounts distributed will differ. States reform also sets 21 as the minimum age limit to buy marijuana. The MORE Act did not set a minimum age limit. Representative Mace calls the States Reform Act a compromise bill, saying there's something in it to make everyone happy.
Every electorate is different, and that we are a republic, and that we do things in a manner that's going to make the most sense, and also stand up in court, stand up to the Constitution, stand up in front of the Supreme Court.
And make no mistake, marijuana reform is a mostly politically agnostic issue. More than 3/4 of Americans already live in a state with some form of legalized pot, and more than 90% of U.S. adults say pot should at least be legal for medical purposes. But what do you think? Should marijuana be legalized? Should it only be legalized for medicinal reasons? Or should it remain listed as a Schedule I narcotic along with heroin, meth, and LSD? Let us know what you think in the comments.